We're tired of being unemployed and underemployed. We are tired of only having to engage in sex work. We are tired of being your outreach people and your peer navigators making $10 to $12 an hour. We are tired of fighting for our country on foreign soil and then being told that we are no longer fit to serve. We are tired of our murders going without any justice and our murderers out there free. We want to be free. And that's why we are here.
Well, hello there. Hello, everyone. And thank you all so very much for joining us. My name is Dee Dee Waters. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And as you all can already see, I have a very important and amazing individual on with me, and I will allow them to introduce themselves. Emmett, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, my name is Emmett Schelling. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the executive director for the Transgender Education Network of Texas, or TENT.
Also known as TENT. Yes, indeed. Thank you so very much for that. So first and foremost, I need to do some housekeeping. Generally, my guest isn't up with me, but generally I do my housekeeping first, and then we go to the guest. So first and foremost, on today, the reason why we're having this conversation is around the safety initiative. This initiative and these discussions are being supported by the National Trans Visibility March. And within that, I just want to make sure that I first and foremost give my appreciation to them and thank them again for being able to allow me to take up space here, which I'm really, really honored to do so, and being able to bring on some amazing folks for you all to be able to see and hear from and learn from. But it also gives me a chance to be able to take up space and talk about things that we generally don't talk about, sometimes because it's uncomfortable conversations or conversations that we don't even know how to have. In this safety initiative, in this discussion on today, we're going to be talking about policy. Now, the reason why I brought Emmett on to have these conversations with me was specifically because of the organization that he is the executive director of. And because I know what this organization does, as well as Emmett's involvement in policy, and it's just absolutely amazing. So I think I touched everything. Also, for those of you that would like to join us for the march, the Trans Visibility March will be held on October the 9th. We ask that you all join us. In some places, there's going to be virtual events that'll be taking places. But if you can join us out in Florida, October the 9th, the information will be available again during this discussion at the end and sometimes during. So we're going to also make sure that you all have the chance to comment, be a part of this discussion as well. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything, please put that in the chat or comment, and we'll be more than happy to see about getting to you all and answering those questions or addressing those comments. So on today, I wanted to talk about policy. And I want to talk about policy specifically because of all of this legislation that has just been aimed specifically at trans folks, right? I know that whenever I originally did this, I believe that there were 70 or 80 bills that went out this year trying to attack trans folks. And I just wanted to get some insight. But before I even go into that, Emmett and some other amazing individuals were at the Texas State Capitol out in Austin. Is that correct, Emmett? If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what took place there.
So yesterday until early this morning, I think we left the Capitol around 6:30 a.m. We had been there since 8 a.m. Well, I had been there since 8 a.m. And the Texas State House was Public Ed or Public Education Committee was hearing SB 2, which is our sports ban bill. It's essentially looking to leave trans kids sidelined from sports. And the argument, obviously is always unfortunately rooted in a mixture of sexism, sort of misogynistic attitudes, and just blatant racism. In Texas, what we saw distributed in our Capitol building was actually a video of a young lady from Connecticut who um, ran track. And Andrea Yearwood, if folks haven't seen the film Changing the Game on Hulu, I highly suggest that you check that movie out. And she is actually a part of it. But what was really bothersome, I think, was unfortunately the way that, and Dee Dee's seen it firsthand here in Texas, how they mix transphobia with racism. And here they zeroed in, unfortunately, on two young, Black trans women who were simply just participating in sports. The narrative was largely and patently false, giving the idea that they were just decimating in all these races. And in all honesty, just like I think most kids, right, that are participating in sports, they were winning, they were losing. That's just what it is.
And it's funny that you even say that, Emmett, because I have seen far too often in so many times, so many instances where you have trans folks that are looking to participate in sports, these trans athletes that are participating in sports. And hey, I celebrate them for participating. And some of them, the way that they're making it seem like they would win, they're totally not winning. Like, and they are being athletes just like any other athlete. And they're winning and they're losing. And it's so sad because the way that they put this is as if a trans person is just going to come in and dominate. But this is all based upon not only science, but just the reality, like athletes win and athletes lose. And there's always someone who's going to be better than you. It's about whether or not those advantages are there. So I do have a question for you. I know that we kind of talked a little bit about why you were there yesterday, well, all day yesterday, even last night. But I kind of want you to tell people a little bit more about Tent, so that way they can kind of understand why you were there. And not only were you there, but you were a representation of an organization that covered an entire state. So let people know a little bit about Tent.
We're a statewide trans-led policy org here in the state of Texas. We're enormously lucky to have a board of directors that is a vast majority of Black, Indigenous, and trans people of color that are navigating and leading the way on what this looks like. When we talk about policy, we talk about literally the barriers that infringe upon our lives. And so when we're looking at that, especially in the state of play that we're in right now, we're looking at literally a quality of life. We're looking at the ability for trans people to just have access to the same opportunities as our cisgender counterparts. And unfortunately, what we've seen is cisgender folks, sometimes well-meaning, sometimes really just kind of going in and just not, how can I tell a story that isn't mine? I think the idea of it, right, in just a very simplistic form would be if I tried to step up to a podium and tell people what it would be like to be a Black trans woman. I think people hopefully laugh me off of that stage, right? And it's the same idea, right? It was just unfortunately having heavily cisgender representation dominating, right, that conversation, and not understanding that there's an innate understanding of who we are. And so what are the barriers? What are the hurdles? And what does this look like for our people when we're trying to literally just live our lives, participate in life, and be afforded the same opportunities as our cisgender counterparts.
Absolutely. How can people find Tent?
You can find us online at transtexas.org. You can find us on Facebook, which I think is also Trans Texas, as well as Twitter, which is at Trans Texas, as well as at Instagram. So clearly, we're a very creative team, and I think one of the um, really big victories and encouragement that I've seen, right, is in the past few years of taking kind of uh, lead of the organization is the growth and what we've seen in how we're doing it, and a lot of times. Not a lot of times, every day, I get pushback, unfortunately, either from funders or from other partner organizations of why are we making these decisions? Why is our feedback the way it is? And I think it really does boil down to nothing about us without us. And I think our community really needs to understand, even though policy does not equal liberation, it never will. And I think that's important, right? But at the same time, policy will make a big deal in terms of our quality of life, in terms of our ability to be a part of this world.
No, absolutely, and I agree 100%. I agree 100%. It's so ironic because Monica Roberts, I remember how she would tell me all the time about policy stuff. And when I first met Monica, she was going out, baby. She was flipping out on somebody, about to get ready to fight this little girl, honey. And I was just sitting there like, ooh, I like this. And when I talked with Monica, some of the things that she would talk to me about really just made me be like, girl, I ain't trying to hit that, because my life was a little bit different than hers as a Black trans woman who transitioned at a later age, and I started mine at a younger age. It just looked different, right? And so policy didn't seem like it did much, but I knew the importance behind voting. And so it was extremely interesting to me that when Monica was like, no, let's go to City Hall, let's go to City Council, let's talk to these people, you tell them how you feeling, go, you need to be in front of them. And as I did that, it let me see how effective my voice was and how important policy is, right? And so just like what you were saying about how policy does have its way in changing things for us, I think that it's extremely important that we look at policy and really try our hardest to make these changes that we need to make. And I wanted to ask you, even within that, suggestions, right? So as we talk about our cis allies, and as we talk about other trans folks, as we talk about all of this bad legislature that keeps getting put out there, what would you suggest for trans folks, right? If there's legislature that looks bad in their area that's coming up, what are your suggestions to them? What do you suggest that they do? How do you suggest that they get involved?
I think the first step is really talking to representatives, talking to elected officials, talking to legislators, having conversations, understanding that just like the work we do is relational, right? Just like I don't want somebody calling me out of the blue, asking me to show face when there's no relationship built. It really is kind of the same sort of idea. And I definitely think, we could get into a debate about is that correct or not, but when it comes to elected officials are there because they're elected to serve us, right? They're elected to be leaders and representatives of their constituency. But what we do know is to affect change and to be able to really connect with what our issues are. It does take building that relationship and really having conversation. One of the other things is really looking wherever your state is. There's probably a website, there's probably a way that you can kind of keep up to date on what are the bills that are moving. What does this look like? Oftentimes you can put in keywords that say gender, that say if you're looking at possibly you're worried about a sports bill, right? You say athletics, you put in different keywords that are going to be embedded right into that policy that's going to be submitted. And so keeping track of that, keeping on top of it, so you know when you go in and the next conversation, right, that you have, well, here's what I saw. Like, let's have another conversation, and as Dee Dee is well aware of, it's also the consistency of being present, reminding people that you're there. I think you mentioned Monica. One of the things that she did in just the best way, I think, was reminding them that yes, absolutely, she'd built a real relationship, but she was very clear about what that relationship was about
Yes.
and why she was showing up. And I think, in terms of that, is understanding, what does the bill say? What are you trying to advocate for? And really, if you don't understand, because policy language is intentionally gatekeeping. It's intentionally sort of laid out in a way that, like, they don't want people to figure out what they're up to sometimes. And so weeding through that and reaching out to folks, attorneys are a really good resource, of course, and folks that have public administration knowledge. But a lot of it is sometimes just patience and reading through it and dissecting it.
Right, and really trying to gain what it's saying. Now, I will say this. I know that whenever I looked at bills and stuff like that, I was just sitting there looking like, oh, Monica, you got to read this to me, honey. I don't even know what these people saying. And, they would use certain language that would make you be like, wait, which one am I supposed to go with, right? So I think that within that, with what you were saying about as far as suggestions to trans folks, are you aware of any other like organizations that are either like similar or like do advocacy work? That way, and I'm sure that people can also Google this, but I want to make sure that, again, that like whenever we're doing this, that we're talking about stuff that we kind of know about from time to time. So do you happen to know of other like trans organizations that kind of look at policy or advocacy or something like that?
Yeah. New York has Kiara St. James is doing some really amazing policy work there, and really pushing forward with it. In Massachusetts, we have Trey Andre Valentine, who took over MTAG, which is, I think, Massachusetts Transgender Advocacy Group.
Now look, I don't want you to mess up nobody's name now. Don't get in no trouble. I want to make sure I protect you. You're still my brother. I gotta protect you, okay? We can't be talking about Monica and think she ain't gonna come after me if you get in trouble for saying somebody's name wrong. So I'm gonna say this, understand something. This may not be everybody's name specifically, but it's great to at least know that there are others. And if you think of others, I would love to hear those. And not only that, but I think that the reason why that was important for me was because, like, when we talk about this means that we can't say that there aren't other organizations out there that are looking at policy and politics, right? And so, in other words, what I'm saying to the people that are watching, if you are one who is of trans lived experience or non-binary, an ally, mama bear, any of these things, I suggest that you go ahead and it lets you know that you can Google these types of services and organizations, and that they do exist. I think that was my main reason within going with that, because I seen it come up, but I also was just like, hey, there's not a need in going through and saying this is the list of them, because that's not fair, because somebody's gonna get forgotten, right? But it is extremely important that we at least know that they are out there. This also brings me to the part about how we talk about trans folks. And when we talk about violence, you made mention of something earlier about how you see the way that TINT has grown and has multiplied. And you don't, and from the conversations that you and I have had, and my involvement even with TINT, I know that since whenever I first heard about TINT compared to when you came and got involved with TINT, two totally different ways, right? And the reason being specifically is because of the way that you all go and do that for us, by us mentality, meaning we're going to go out into the community. I can't speak for every trans person, but if I get more trans voices in this space, I can make sure that these voices are heard better, right? And I think that when you did that, it was that really changed a lot of things. And so I really think that that's important. I think it's important as we try to move forward that we look at that. So I wanted to ask you this. When we talk about what trans folks can do, right? We also talk about our allies, right? What is your suggestion for allies? Because I know in Texas that you not only try to get trans folks to come out, but again, we're in Texas. And when you're in Texas, it hits different. The way that the transphobia, the hate, the danger, right? It just hits different, especially for trans people of color. And just trans people, period. And so what do you suggest to our allies? Because I know a lot of people decide to be like, I just want to speak for them and I don't know what to say. What would you suggest to someone who would like to be an ally and speak up as it pertains to policy for trans folks?
Yeah, I think the first thing to remember is you can't speak for me. You can't speak for trans people. You can't speak for an experience you innately just don't understand. What you can do is stand beside us and support us in a way that you stand and you talk about who you are, what your experience is, and why you give a damn about us, why you're taking your time to stand up, and why you're taking your energy to give to this. I think another really important thing to note is that trans-led orgs get 3 cents to every $100 that cisgender LGBTQ orgs get in this work. So that's 3 cents to every $100. So when we're talking about what does that look like right now when we're looking at policy fights, not just in Texas, but across this country, and seeing where we've been successful is having people be able to be empowered, to be able to be supported, and for people to be able to know that, you know, when I say people, trans folks, to know that they're not in it alone, just with other trans folks. So what does that look like? To volunteer, to lend support, to lend skills. What does that look like for people? And I think that's really important when we're thinking about it. Just like I wouldn't, assume to go and talk about what it's like to be a gay man because I'm not. But however, like I absolutely will stand up and say homophobia is wrong. Talking about sexual orientation and how that not only intersects, right, with transness in many cases, but also it is a separate thing, even though it is intrinsically connected. And so understanding that and understanding what this fight looks like, and also understanding we all have skin in this game. Even for our cisgender allies, we are the last line of sort of defense, and also, what does this look like for us to be successful versus what does it look like for us to be defeated?
Now, with that in mind, since we talk about cisgender allies, so what about what if there is a lawmaker that is watching this? What if there is an elected official that is watching this right now, and they say that, hey, they are not in Texas, and they just don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. These trans people is coming. They don't know what to do. What would you suggest as it pertains to, like, when it comes down to bills, because we get asked that question, and we totally, I know I get asked that question. Hey, I'm new to this. I really don't know much about trans folks. How am I supposed to speak up when it comes down to, like, bills or bad bills? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, I think the first thing to understand is that bills that are just trans specific, right? Pro, anti, those are not the only bills that affect our lives. I think first and foremost, we're human beings. that need to work, that need to live, that need to be safe in their communities, that need to have access to healthcare, that need to have access to medical care, that need to have access and opportunity for education, just like any other human being. And so, what does it look like for the barriers of simply being trans? So, looking at that, you know, in the workplace, in the school, in every setting that we're talking about, what does that look like for a trans person? Because in many cases, it looks different than a cisgender individual. And so I think that's the first thing to understand is that, you know, it's not just trans bills that affect trans people because, too often we see ourselves literally just disseminated down to our gender identity in a way that's toxic and it's harmful and it's largely tied into other prejudices and biases, just to be blunt.
I think that's really interesting that you say that, and I think that right now, even within hearing you talking about it, I'm just sitting here like that. You're absolutely right. I remember you had said something earlier, and right when you said it, it made me smile because it made me think about when I met you. And although it ain't nobody business how I met you, y'all, Emma was in my room. Mm-hmm. No, so we were at the Black Trans Advocacy Coalition conference, and of course, every year my roommate was Monica Roberts, and I come in the room and Emmett and Monica and they're talking about whatever they talk, probably politics or some stuff I wasn't trying to hear about, and Emmett says, "I got a burger." And I'm just sitting there like, I'll eat them burgers. And it was just, ever since that day, there was something that was going on, and I had to be a little sharp with Emmett. And even though I was a little sharp with him, he totally understood. He totally got it. And he loved me that day and every day since. And I just wanted to make sure that I made mention of that. Emmett, I love you and thank you so much. Now, I wanted to kind of talk about when we bring up people that are elected officials. And I wanted to kind of talk about trans folks that are elected officials. I wound up reaching out to a couple trans elected officials. Ironically, for a few of them, there were things that were going on this same day, which is, it happens. So I wasn't able to get them to be on. But I know that even you and we're connected to a couple of people that are running for office now that are trans folks. And I mean, absolutely amazing people. And I think that it's important that we encourage more trans people to be able to get out there. Trans people get out there. And if you are someone who's interested in becoming an elected official, to do so. Do you have any suggestions for a person who may feel that, you know what, I want to do this. I think I would like to be an elected official. Do you have any suggestions for them?
I think I'll be remiss if I don't shout out Mariah Moore.
I know. I was going to listen. Let me tell you. I was like, I'm gonna let you say what you gotta say, and then I'm gonna drop a name. So yes, absolutely, Mariah Moore out in New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, really, really doing it big. I've seen commercials and everything. Really, really cool. You all should go and check out Mariah Moore, and if you can, support the campaign. Please support the campaign. Go ahead, Emmett. I'm sorry.
No, I'm the one who derailed the train. I think it would have been remiss to not talk about. We have just a powerhouse, member of our community running a really great race right now in New Orleans. If elected, she'll be the first, Black trans city council member there. It's a big deal. Why is it a big deal? It's because Mariah is running in a district that she grew up in, that she knows, and that's been hit in so many ways. When we're talking about how does gentrification affect trans folks? How does gentrification affect Black, Indigenous, and trans people of color? But also just cisgender as well. She understands her district. She understands what she's seen, right, happen throughout the years. And I think it's so important to really also remind people, if you're thinking about this, it is, be proud of who you are. Don't run away from that, but also don't make your platform about that. Because at the end of the day, it's a part of us. Just like when we tell people our transness is a part of us, but it is not who we are. It's just as important to remember that when we're thinking about what are the things we care about, right? Is it fighting for, municipal paid sick leave? Is it making sure that a lot of historically racist, municipal laws are repealed or rolled back? Is it fighting for a tougher NDO? Is it fighting for an NDO that doesn't exist? What does that look like? And also really knowing the area that you're running in, right? The district you're running in, and knowing what that looks like, and most importantly, I think is really being connected into the community, and getting to talk to other folks, and understanding what their input is, versus the priorities that you have, and what does that look like for what they're voicing concern about, and how do you have solutions for that, and how has being who you are informed those solutions. Because I think we're beautiful, I think we're powerful, and I think we have the ability to create and make change that isn't just good for us, that's good for
Good for
everyone.
everyone. Absolutely, absolutely, and I agree with you on that. I think that's extremely important. Everything that you just said, and I think that you're absolutely right. I think that far too often we wind up not doing things because we're scared of certain things that may happen to us whenever it comes down to us trying to run. I see that there is a comment. I think that we lost Emmett for a second, everyone. He'll be back. Give him just a second. This is what we do for fun, everyone. We get on our streams and we do these, meetings, and our phones ring. That's what happens. We all know. So, Emmett, we have a question that came in, or a comment rather. Yes, I've seen a lot of trans folks running for government, which is amazing. I live in the country. I live out of the country. I live in the country, Mexico, sorry. And where I live, there is a trans woman in local government. That's absolutely amazing. It's really, really good to see those types of things. I remember one time, again, Monica Roberts, which anytime I'm talking about policy and stuff like that, y'all gonna hear me say her name a lot. I remember Monica Roberts always saying that trans rights are human rights. And I also remember her talking about how she never thought that she would see the day when certain things happen. And I'm glad that she was able to see trans people in office before she left us. I'm glad that she was able to see, things like organizations like TENT and so many other ones. Even to see that there's a national trans visibility march, like all of these different things that are happening. And it's absolutely amazing. Now, Emmett, you said something when you were talking, and you brought up NDO. I want to make sure that people that are watching know what an NDO is. Could you please let me know what an NDO is?
It's a non-discrimination ordinance, oftentimes in states that do not have statewide protections that are going to, in a state like Texas, right? I can be fired from employment simply for being who I am. I can be kicked out of my housing simply for being who I am. And understanding that even though, when we're talking about passing state laws, right, and there's a little bit more process to it. Unfortunately, there's often a lot more time attached to that. And looking at, you do have the ability to organize, advocate, and push municipal government, right, to make sure that we're recognized in, our hyper local, cities or towns that we live in, to still have those equalizer. I hate to say protections, right? Even though, yes, but
no, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I was literally putting down my little note, because what I wanted to make sure that I said is that we must also remember and be mindful that just because a lot of these cities or states have certain ordinances or laws, it does not mean that it is inclusive of gender identity, right? And so like that is a huge difference. That is a very big difference. And I think that that's extremely important that we be mindful of that, right? So the reason why, so I know, let me tell y'all something. The only reason why I know what an NDO is, at first I thought it was something you get served, like the people gonna bring it to your house, knock on your door, and hand you that little envelope, and it's an NDO. No, but the reason why I'm so aware of it is because we fought really, really hard in Houston to be able to get a non-discrimination ordinance, which was HERO, on the books. And of course, we did, but things happen. But even in Houston, there still isn't a non-discrimination ordinance that is inclusive of gender identity, right? And like these are things that are important. This is really, really important because we don't have things that are there in place and protection specifically for us. So when we say that trans rights are human rights, our rights should be equal, right? And a lot of times that's not what we see. And even whenever you look at current policy now, so the reason why this safety initiative is being had right now, this conversation, is because far too often we look at violence, right? We look at violence and we think people getting murdered and we think people getting beaten, right? Violent attacks, like physical attacks, right? But what we forget is that violence is happening all around. A lot of these bills that they're putting out to try to ban trans kids from participating, or trans athletes, period, from participating, those are forms of violence. And we should be able to come together to create safety. And when you have policy that is geared at being violent towards us, right? And when I say being violent, I'm meaning like taking away my human rights, right? Like being able to discriminate against me, not only because of me being Black, but specifically because of me being trans, right? And when someone says, well, but they have things like on a federal level, right? And I wanted to ask you about this because I remember talking to Monica, and there was a conversation that was going on, and a person stood up and said, well, I don't understand why there's a need for a local ordinance, right? Okay. Why there's a need for a local ordinance when there's a federal law that says you can't discriminate against people. What are your thoughts there?
So our federal law, in the way that it's laid out right now, and I think a lot of people have probably heard about the Equality Act, right? It's a federal piece of legislation that would codify, right, that we couldn't be discriminated. But unfortunately, what people do not understand is marriage equality did not get us to where we need to be. And it's also understanding that when we talk about equality, that is different than equity, right? So even when we reach that equal place, in terms of trans folks, we still have a little ways to go. In terms of, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we still have a ways to go when we're talking about that. There's still work to be done, and so it's to remind people that yes, there are court rulings. There are, when we talk about equal employment, right? What does that look like? And so understanding that. One of those claims, I actually am personally dealing with this with an individual who has had an equal employment claim that's been going through the course for the last 10 years.
Wow.
And so understanding that we do need more shorter term solutions to be able to prevent it from getting to that place. Prevent one of our people from having to go through a decade of literally like fighting and going through, the just monetary expense, the emotional and mental expense, the time expense. What does it take to keep pushing this, right? Because we know that unfortunately, when it comes to that, it's not just about our individual issues. A lot of the times, it's about all of us. And I think, like, it's an important thing to remember that what does this look like in this particular moment in time.
Right. Honestly, our liberation, right? Okay, so the liberation of trans people is liberations of everyone to be who you are without experience discrimination, without experiencing discrimination. I think that. So I will say this. I agree. I do think that trans liberation is something that will be able to impact so many others, right? I have to remind my mother was a victim of she was raped when she was younger, and the thing was that the reason why it touches me so much is because the person who raped her carved his name in her thigh with a razor blade. And so every time my mom went to sit down, bathe herself, anything, she had to see that man's name. When we were fighting for the hero, what was it, the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. When we were fighting for this Equal Rights Ordinance, so many people talked about bathroom stuff and how trans folks were going to go into the bathrooms and attack. The trans women would go in and attack the little children that are in there that are using the girls' restroom. And it bothered me because I remember my mother sitting there saying one time, she was like, well, I wouldn't have a problem with you because you my child, but I wouldn't want nobody to come up in there. And what if they come in there and rape me? The problem that I had with that is that she just changed the narrative. Because the person who raped her, it didn't happen in no bathroom. It didn't happen by some random person. It didn't happen with somebody who had on a wig. And for me, the reason why I'm saying that is because they were attacking us in this way. But if we were to look at it, right, for what it is, these are just people that are attacking trans folks realistically for no reason. We have been accessing the bathrooms that we identify as for decades now. And so it's like when this kind of stuff is happening, we have to remember that these laws that sometimes we think that are all protective of us, sometimes that language doesn't include us. Remember when you talked about language earlier in those bills, sometimes it doesn't include us. And we think that because it's this, someone said, oh, it's the Gay Rights Act, you have this or you have this right. We wind up looking at it and we're like, oh, well, they put us in this bucket with everybody, so we should have rights. But we wind up learning that far too often, even in Texas, Malaysia Booker, when we talk about certain things that took place in Texas, there weren't inclusion for trans folks and didn't speak specifically to gender identity. So it is extremely important that we as trans people start making sure that we pay attention to policy and what legislature is out there. I did want to say this, Emmett, and as I get ready to say this, I want you to think about what are some of the ways that people can help organizations like Tent. I really would like to know that. I really would like to know how people can pour into organizations like Tent. And within saying that, I'm saying like Tent because I don't want it to seem like we're just saying that this is what everybody wants and this is how you can support everyone. But if you're speaking from that place, right, it lets us know some of the things that are possible. But as you think of that, I want to let everyone know that it's coming up at that time around about 45 minutes. I want to make sure that I give people a chance to be able to give some comments, ask any questions that you all would like. That way we can get some of those out. But I want to give Emmett a chance to answer this question. And if no comments come up or no questions come about, we'll continue. It's totally fine. But we would totally appreciate you all's involvement. And to those of you who have commented and have gotten involved, thank you so very much. And thank you all again for watching. So Emmett, how can people help organizations like Tent?
I think the big thing, right? Get involved. What does that look like if it's volunteering? Again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, right? And I think for trans folks too, right? It looks different than our allies. It's reaching out and saying like, hey, I'm really interested in XYZ. This is what I know, or I have no idea, right? I'm just starting new because we all we all start at the same place, and it's not knowing anything. And so we're only up to go from there, right? And so really kind of just engaging. So what does it look like if there's an event? I know so many events right now are online. And in a way, the accessibility is better, but not better, right?
Right.
And being in community means something different right now in a global pandemic. And I think when we look at that is how can the organization support what you're looking to achieve, and how can you support the organization looking to achieve that? And a lot of times, especially in larger cities, I will say, right, you may have different trans organizations that are doing different things. I know, Miss Didi, when you were, in Houston with me, before you just, abandoned me. uh, Even though our work intersected many times, we also really were addressing different needs in our community. And so what does that look like? What organizations may be out there for you that are still in some way going to be impacting policy, right? Didi, there's so many times that you and Monica were in the Capitol, right? Monica and I going to Austin, and what does that look like? And so, just reaching out and figuring out what are the opportunities, and where am I starting from? And if I'm starting from the very starting point, then that's okay too. But don't be afraid. We are all siblings in our community, and
Right.
I know that we're all just looking to help support each other and help progress our community forward.
Right. I mean, hey, we some amazing people. We're some amazing people. And I was supposed to get ready to use a different word, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say people because I have an affirmation word. My affirmation word. But we are absolutely amazing, and I really appreciate what you were saying. I think that I want to say this. I do want to say this. I want to say this to the person that is out there that feels like they don't feel comfortable to just jump in and go and talk to state legislatures, to state ledge, and don't want to go to the Capitol. It is really also okay to send an email, to make a phone call, to write a letter. Like these are things that are also things that you can do if you don't feel comfortable with going and standing in front of someone and saying something. And especially times like right now when we have a whole pandemic going on, you don't even have to go. You can totally I believe that you can also submit your testimony in some cases, right?
Yeah, in a lot of states, they have the ability to submit testimony without going in person. I know one of the things that we do at Tent is we have the ability for people to access that online and submit their written testimony or submit a video testimony. And so looking at, doing that's a huge deal still. And I think, last I would definitely want to mention that there's a lot of people go out and they have the idea that they have to do big things, right? These huge things, or else it's not worth it. Um, I I really kind of press against that, right? Because the reality of life and the reality of many folks within our community is much different. Our time, what does it look like? What does our life look like? And so to add on another burden of beating ourselves up because we're feeling like we're not doing enough. No, every single thing counts. Every voice that we can raise up and make heard, every person that stands up and says, "No, I matter, and I'm not going to take this, and I'm going to fight like hell against it, and I'm going to raise my voice at it." That matters. And so, really encouraging our people to not minimize our power. Don't
Right.
minimize your story. Don't minimize the just fact that you deserve better than what you're living with if you're seeing something that needs changed.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, honey. We have to. You are absolutely right. So there was a comment that came in. I want to go ahead and check this comment out. If you all don't mind, could we bring up that comment? So it's actually a question. It says, what's the most pressing or challenging policy issue for the trans community that is happening across the country? So I'm going to, Emmett, I want you, if you would like to go first, or you want me to go, or would you like to go? Which one?
You know, I'm going to say ladies first, always.
Well, thank you, baby, because I was going to go first anyway. I was just trying to be polite because you the guest, but I'm the host. No. So honestly, I think that's some of the most challenging policy for me right now. I'm kind of a little unbalanced on this one, because I want to say that I have a huge issue with the trans panic defense, and I believe that we need more people focusing on banning the trans panic defense, as that's something that we could definitely do. I believe that the more of us come together and focus on banning that, I think that that's something that we can do in multiple states. It's already been done, but we could totally do it in way more. There's so much room for that. But if we're just talking about, like, you know, current policy that's like specifically attacking trans folks, I would say that it's probably going to be around trans athletes and the way that people are attacking the trans athletes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Those are, it's hard for me with this question too. I don't think there's necessarily one top challenging issue right now. We're at a critical point in our community where adults are continuing to see escalating violence, continuing to see escalating discrimination, and knowing that, you know, all of the sort of nuanced ways that happens too. But I think one big issue that is on my mind, right, is medical care payments. Because literally banning trans youth, which these are largely targeted towards kids,
Right.
and I think like that's so important, right? That remembering that some of these kids, you know, it is life saving. Looking at what does that look like, and knowing also just the larger implications that, like, legislators don't belong in our healthcare. Legislators don't belong trying to make medical decisions that we already know that well-respected medical organizations, physicians, psychologists, you know, biologists, kinesiologists across the board are saying, no, this is the best standard of care. This is the best medical practice. And so recognizing how important that is, the larger implications of it, and, you know, the most important thing, I think, fighting like hell for these kids. Seeing these young people, for me, of how different could my life have looked had I been able to have the opportunity to be who I am.
Yes.
Throughout my life.
Yes, and support it, and understanding that not only support it in home, right, but it doesn't matter if our parents support us or not. Again, that whole equal rights situation, right? It doesn't mean that I shouldn't have as many rights as anyone else. I should have equal rights, and so it's so interesting that you say that, because I agree so much. Like, I feel like I think that I get so caught up in, like, the murders, right, and the violence, to where my focus kind of stays on, like, this whole trans panic defense. But you're absolutely right, because if I believe that if we had the support that our cis counterparts have, especially growing up, we are already some amazing people, honey. Us walking out the door is a revolutionary act, and not only that, it is a blessing for somebody to see us. You know, we have impacted so many lives. I appreciate you so much. I thank you, and I thank you for the work that you're doing. I thank you for the work that Tint is doing. It's so amazing to see so many trans people, right? Trans people being involved in policy. That is an amazing thing. And then to also see the inclusion of BIPOC trans folks in leadership and doing and making decisions. So I really appreciate you for that. So what I want you to do is that we're fixing to get ready to go into our closing comments. I would love to hear 3 things that you would like to leave people with from today. Like if there's 3 things that you would like to leave folks with as we go out today.
You know, I think for our community, we've been through some rough times. You know, yesterday was Marsha P. Johnson's birthday. Looking at progress we've made, right, that she sparked in many ways, and understanding where we're at, right? The first thing is that this fight has been a long fight. We stand on the shoulders of the people who fought before us, and we owe a responsibility to younger folks who go before us or after us, sorry. And knowing that this is not something that's going to be solved overnight. Don't beat yourself up. Hold each other close, and remind yourself that you know, we're every bit as wonderful. I would maybe even say with some bias, right? We're a little bit more sometimes, right? Because despite so many different things, here we are. We're standing strong. We're standing tall, and what we have seen, right, by and large, is a larger push from our community, especially our BIPOC trans folks, to say we're not going to sit down and be sidelined anymore. We're being affected. We're being impacted. We have solutions. Maybe they don't look like the traditional, conventional ones that you're used to. Maybe they don't look professional and whatever that word looks like, which we won't dive into that since we're closing right now, right? But we know who we are, and we know what we need, and we know what's best for us. So be confident, don't back down, and hold each other close.
Thank you so very much for that, Emmett. Emmett, again, is the executive director for TENT, which is the Transgender Education Network of Texas. Is that correct?
That is, I just expected you to go with TENT, but look at you.
Hey, you know, I'm doing. Emmett, I thank you so very much for joining us. I thank you for being here to represent TENT and for the things that you all have done. Thank you for all of your time that you spent at the Capitol recently. I'm really, really glad that you all were able to be there, so it is very appreciated. For those of you that have tuned in on tonight and that tuned in on yesterday, I ask and I hope that you all will tune in again on next month, on September the 22nd, which is a Wednesday, from 7 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, again, for those of you that are looking to join us at the National Trans Visibility March, we ask that you all do so. I believe that it is in Orlando, Florida on October the 9th. That information will be provided for you all to see. So please make sure that you join us, not only for the march, but for the conversations as we talk about this initiative around safety. Our next conversation is going to be talking about accessible resources. There's so many resources out there, but they're not accessible. Again, when we talk about violence with the mindset of it being more than just murder or violent attacks on our bodies, we have to be mindful that safety can be put in other ways and used at other times. And sometimes that's in policy. So as Emmett said earlier, you can get out there and you can do things like vote. You can get out there and you can participate. But I think that one of the first steps is get registered to vote. And the second step, like Monica would also always say, is get out there and vote, right? You can get registered, but it takes you to be able to get out there and vote. And if you don't want to get registered, I suggest that you reach out to your elected officials and pressure them to make sure that your rights are equal to your counterparts. Thank you so much, Emmett, for being here. Thank you to the National Trans Visibility March. And thank you to everyone who tuned in on today. We'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Because we're tired of being unemployed and underemployed. We are tired of only having to engage in sex work. We are tired of being your outreach people and your peer navigators making $10 to $12 an hour. We are tired of fighting for our country on foreign soil and then being told that we are no longer fit to serve. We are tired of our murders going without any justice and our murderers out there free. We want to be free. And that's why we are here.